Okay, we're day 3. We're now in chapter 8. Let's start chapter 8, verse 1. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. So the waters are starting to subside from everything that's going on. The fountains of the deep and the windows of heavens were closed. The rains from the heavens was restrained. The waters were receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the Mount of Ararat. Some believe that would be in the mountain range. Would be located near Turkey. Actually, there's a documentary on this I watched years ago about some guys that were actually believe they had found fragments and pieces of the ark in Mount Ararat, but it was just hard to get to because the government of Turkey was not very sympathetic to such an expedition. I forget the name of it, but if any of you are interested, I'm sure if you'll send me a message, I can research it and find it. It was years ago that I watched this. I believe it's so long ago I watched it on a VHS. And the waters continued to abate, which, by the way, just once again, if you get a chance, I'm looking forward to this year, hopefully getting to go to the Ark in Kentucky that Answers in Genesis Ken Ham had built. What a marvelous sight that'll be to get to see. Verse 5, the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. At the end of the 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. Then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot, and she returned to him in the ark, for the waters were still in the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark with him. Verse 10, he waited another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Uh-oh. Look at that. It may be time. It may be time to get off this ark. And Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. While he waited another 7 days and sent forth the dove, and she did not return to him anymore. Imagine, was that kind of like the longest 7 days ever? It probably was. Altogether, when you total up all of this, it looks like we're basically dealing with, he was in that ark altogether 377 days when you add it all up. Wow. I mean, we're talking like a year and 17 days. Right? Wow. A long time. A long time. Can you imagine being on this boat? By the way, it was an engineering marvel to be able to be on a boat with animals, to have enough food stored up. And by the way, there would have been enough room. He wouldn't have taken naturally the largest of each kind. He would have taken probably more of a younger, more or less developed animal at that kind, probably more closer, to younger in life, not as large, not requiring as much. By the way, but, like all these animals, I mean, a dog grows a lot in basically a year, a year with some change. So I can just imagine what an animal looked like going on, then coming out. I would suppose more than likely a lot of these were younger animals, so they'd be smaller, less food, less waste. And then a year later, you already start to see a lot of pickup, a lot of growth. I'm sure they were ready to get off. Just wondered, what must these last 7 days look like? What was there a thought of hey, come on, Lord. It's been a year, and these animals are getting big. They're starting to stink a lot more. Verse 13, in the 601st year, In the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried. Then God said to Noah, go out from the ark, you and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals, creeping things that creep on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply. Do you see anything reminding you back, of Genesis 1 through 2? You kind of have basically a repeat, okay? God starts over, starts fresh, and here we go. Let's go ahead and the reset button has been pressed. Man has another chance. Be fruitful, multiply. And you're going to find out the only problem is that Noah and his sons and his wives, they were still all sinners. They all had the DNA of Adam. Okay? They all had what we would call original sin. They were guilty by nature. So, eventually, you're going to see Noah goes bad. Every beast, every creeping thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by families from the ark. Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal. We see why we had the seven pairs, and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. I want to point out a couple things that, just in my time with the Lord in this, really caused me to worship Him in His Word. So we have here Moses. Remember, he's writing this. This is going to the children of Israel. The children of Israel are going to use this. They're going into the promised land. They've got these 5 books. And Noah's over here talking about, remember, they knew that they had the requirements of the sacrificial system, and Noah built an altar to the Lord, Yahweh, and he sacrifices. All right, this sounds very familiar, to the children of Israel. It's a very familiar thing. And they're burning offerings. So there's already sacrifice. Although a lot of the sacrificial system gets established as Noah writes out, Leviticus, and he receives the law. But we find that sacrifice is happening. And anytime we see sacrifice, it's always pointing us to Christ. The ultimate, Christ, who is the ultimate sacrifice, right? Look what happens. So he comes, he sacrifices. It appeases God. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma of the sacrifices, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Here's what you see here. You see, let's see if I can go back up here. You see sacrifice, and then you see mercy, right? God says, I'm not going to destroy anymore. The intention of man's heart is from his youth. I'll never strike it again like I just did. You see mercy. You see mercy and you see grace. But before you see that, it's because you saw sacrifice. Innocent, these clean, innocent animals, 377 days on this ark, they are offered in place to satisfy the innocent for the guilty for man. And we see a picture of the cross right here. This is what happens at the cross. The sacrifice of Christ brings grace and mercy to mankind. So you see even you see the thread of the gospel even right here in chapter 8. Now let's go over to chapter 9. Yeah, we're fine here. We're going to continue on with chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply," just like we had seen in Genesis 1. "The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, all the fish of the sea. In your hand they are delivered." Does this not remind you of some of the language of, the dominion language that we saw? The language that you see in Genesis 1. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. Now what's interesting is there's some debate in this, but there's many that would say that this actually is where meat is first really ate, where God says it's okay to eat meat. Most would say that from Adam all the way to Noah, there was, it was vegetarian, and that right here, everything that lives shall be food for you. Now, it's true that before the fall, definitely Adam and Eve were not eating meat. After the fall, there's some that would say they did eat meat in the sense that we see Abel offering a blood sacrifice, and sometimes some of the sacrifices, depending on the one, could actually, a portion of it could be used for food. It's not super something to debate about. It's just, kind of interesting food for thought. No pun intended there. "And as I gave you green plants, I have given you everything." For sure, we do see man eating meat, at least right there. There's such rebellion before this. Rebellion in chapter 6 when it's describing the sons of God, the daughters of men, and just the Nephilim, the fallenness of man. It's possible they probably were already eating meat, I think, but now we see, at least officially here, God's kind of, giving the okay and saying, it's food for you. But we are reminded of just this rhythm that God had already provided food for Adam and Eve and given instructions. God gives instructions for Noah here. "But you shall not eat flesh with its life," that is, its blood. If you're going to eat it, you need to cook it, because if you don't cook it, it will be bad for you. So, when you don't cook meat all the way, you see blood. You cut into meat, you see blood. And the more blood you see when you cut meat, the higher chances for parasites, the higher chances that something bad can happen. And it was very important that mankind multiplied at this point, right? He needed to multiply. And what can stop a man from multiplying? Well, disease. And where could he get disease? Well, from food. And now man has this opportunity to eat food that, moving things. He's now getting to eat meat, and meat that has not been fully cooked and has blood. It has a greater chance to cause disease, and it would be bad. It would make it hard to be fruitful and multiply. So he said, don't do that. And also, we find another reason is there's a sacredness that he wants mankind to understand, a sacredness to the image of God, and that blood is special. Well, of course, it points us to the day that there will be the precious blood of Christ shed in our place. He says in verse 5, For your lifeblood I will require reckoning, for every beast I will require it, and from man. For his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. So there's a sacredness that he doesn't want them eating raw meat. I think it's a disease factor, but also there is a specialness that he wants you to understand, that there's life in the blood, and that you can't shed, you can't shed the blood of a man without your blood being shed. Man is made in God's image, and that's sacred. And that was something that had to be established, because that helps to actually point us forward towards the preciousness of the blood of Christ, the preciousness of God's sacrifice. And this wouldn't have been lost on the original recipients, the children of Israel, receiving this at the hand of Moses. He says, you will be fruitful, multiply, teem on the earth, and multiply in it. Verse 8, Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, Behold, I will establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you. Verse 10, And every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, the beasts of the earth with you, as many as came out from the ark, it is every beast of the earth. I will establish my covenant with you. I like this. I will establish my covenant with you. And never again shall all the flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. God says, I want to make a covenant with you, an agreement. Never am I going to destroy by the waters of the flood. Never again like this. And God said, This is a sign of the covenant that I will make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, the rainbow, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. So what's interesting, this, by the way, would have been huge wording for the children of Israel, who knew that there was a covenant with Abraham that was made, an unconditional covenant. They would have been familiar with the covenant that would have come as a result of the Mosaic covenant. They had to keep the law. And Moses talks about this covenant-keeping God. He makes a covenant, and he's the one keeping it. It's an unconditional. It's not up to man. Like the Mosaic covenant, man had to participate in that to keep that, and Israel didn't. That's why they end up going into captivity and suffer all the consequences that the Mosaic covenant warned. It was conditional. The Abrahamic covenant was unconditional. It's what God's doing. He would make a great nation of Israel that would bless all the nations, that would bring about the Messiah. And now those of us that have the Messiah are blessing all the nations. That's why we support missionaries and send them around the world. That's why we spread the gospel. But he says, I set my bow in the clouds. God says, I made a covenant. I'll show it to you. Every time you see a rainbow, you're going to be reminded that the wrath of God, the wrath of God has been satisfied against flooding the earth again and killing all of mankind for his sinfulness. What a great sign for the children of Israel that every time after it rained, they would see this rainbow. And this rainbow for them was a sign that God keeps his promises. Just like when God made his promise to Abraham to make a great nation as Israel is going into the promised land. This is huge stuff. Moses is laying out for them. This God is a faithful covenant-keeping God. You can trust this God. And every time they saw a rainbow, they could trust that same unconditional covenant towards that he made with Noah, with mankind thereafter the flood. This is the same covenant-keeping God that's going to lead them in the promised land. By the way, it's interesting. Several commentators will say this bow is, it's a rainbow, which, a rainbow, has this kind of look of like a bow, right? I'm not a great drawer. Let's just pretend, and here's the earth, and many commentators, guys like A.W. Pink, several others make the point and go, this was a war, but a rainbow is descriptive of a war bow, and saying this is earth. And notice that a rainbow, if an arrow goes through a bow, the point of attack is actually not towards the earth, but it's away from the earth. And there's several commentators who have said this is such a great picture that God's wrath, will actually come towards himself someday. It's pointing towards the sun, that God's not going to take his wrath back out on the earth through a flood. God will one day take his wrath out on his son. I don't know if that's exactly what God wants us to get from that, but many commentators are pretty big on it. So that's just kind of thoughts for you there. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall never again become a flood to destroy the earth. So God makes a promise, says, I'm never going to destroy it again in that same manner. Now listen, the Lord will come someday, and he will bring judgment to this earth. But he's not going to do it in that same way. Verse 16, and when the bow is in the clouds, I will see it, and I'll remember the everlasting covenant, between God and every living creature. God will never destroy the world through a flood again in the same way. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. The sons of Noah went forth from the ark, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these people all the whole earth were dispersed. Now remember, these sons of Noah, they all originate, everybody comes from Adam. There are some people through history that have falsely taken this passage and kind of said, well, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, these guys, these are where all the races started right here. And I would go, nope, that's not true. Actually, race, the Bible doesn't talk about like different races, okay? As far as, Shem, Ham, and Japheth are all of one blood. That one blood tracks all the way to Adam. All of us are one blood. We track all the way to Adam. Race is a social construct. We have different ethnicities, but we don't have race. We find here Shem, Ham, and Japheth, different races don't start with them. They are of the race of Adam. We're all of the race of Adam. I like what Paul says over, over in Acts 17:26, Paul indicates that we're actually all of one blood. By the way, here would be one of the ways we would solve racism today, is that if we all started to realize that we are all actually one. There is actually little difference. There is little difference between us. All there is melanin in our skin. That's the only difference. We are the same. Otherwise, it's just melanin. That's the only difference. If we start to see that we don't define ourselves by the differences of the color of our skin, that we all actually are related to each other through Adam, and in Adam we all die, and in Christ we all live. And if we all live in Christ, if we are centered on the gospel message, if we are centered on being restored to God and each other through the work of the cross, that is how you actually have reconciliation between what a culture would say call races, which once again, in the Bible, there's not multiple races. There's just one race, the race of Adam. Okay. Verse 20, and Noah began to be a man of the soil. He planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. We're not exactly sure what happened here, but something happened. And what happened was pretty scandalous. And Adam and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, there's all sorts of speculation about what it was that Canaan did in Jewish history. There's all sorts of different ideas about what happened exactly. What does it mean that he saw the nakedness of his father? Some has supposed that seeing the nakedness of his father, actually, that's the idea that that it's more than just seeing his father. That something happened between him and his mother, or that something inappropriate happened between he and his father sexually. I don't think the scriptures really give that. It doesn't give us a clue as to what happened. I don't think it was that. I think what we have here is, here's Ham. Noah gets a little far off here, which, by the way, this is just the honesty of the Bible. A great guy like Noah, the last things we read about Noah is that he's basically drunk and uncovered, acting a fool in his tent. But Ham comes along and he sees the nakedness of his father, and he takes that as an opportunity to, he tells his two other brothers, and in such a way, he's doing it in such a way that he's doing it where it makes him seem more powerful than his father, that he's not honoring his father. Because you see that when he tells Shem and Japheth about it, they took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, they walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. They honored their father. And we see over here Ham, there's some kind of dishonor. And really, it probably had a lot to do with him trying to take a position of maybe superiority over his dad. We're not really exactly sure, but whatever it was bad. It was way out of bounds. And we see that Shem and Japheth, and their faces were turned backward. They did not see their father's nakedness, but their brother did. And when Noah woke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done, and he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the servant of servants shall be his brothers." Now, what's interesting is, the line of people that come from Ham, are the Canaanites. And you'll discover as we get later on into our reading that, the descendants of Israel, that Shem come from Shem. And, from Shem we'll eventually see Israel come. And that, Israel and the Canaanites will clash. Israel's going to have to eradicate them out of the land. These Canaanites come from Ham, and you can kind of see the prophecy that Noah kind of already prophesies. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. And by the way, their forefather is Ham, and Ham in some way took pleasure in seeing the nakedness of his father and mocking him for it. And you can see the type of character Ham has and how that kind of passes itself down to the Canaanites, who are known for having, really bad character. All right, their character is so bad that, their character can't seem to spell character. Let's see if I can correct that. Here we go. Let's go a little bit better. There's such bad character that part of God's plan is that the Canaanites would be removed completely so that their character couldn't corrupt the character of Israel worshiping the one true God in the promised land. Because Israel needed to be holy and pure before the Lord. They had the responsibility of bringing about the Messiah. They were going to bring the gospel to the world. So you can see what kind of happens here. Now remember, Moses is, he's got the children of Israel. They're supposed to go in the promised land. They're supposed to remove these Canaanites. And this is good. This helps them understand the background and story and genealogy of what God is doing. This is all part of biblical theology, okay? So we also see what happens to the other sons. He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem." Which you notice, I'm just noticing this here in the text. He says, "Blessed be the Lord, Yahweh," right? Elohim, right? And he said, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem," who, from Shem comes Israel. That's very interesting. They decided to use Lord there. He didn't seem to use it right here when he's talking about Japheth. May God, and that's Elohim, enlarge Japheth and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servants. So you can see that this would just be something important to the children of Israel. They could see just the blessedness of the line of Shem that they come from, that this same covenant-keeping God was with them. And as they go into the promised land, as they try to live for him, as they are called to follow the law of Moses, they are a special people called out. They are priests of God. And today, if you're in Christ, you are a spiritual child of Abraham. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. And all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. By the way, he died. He died. What happened in the garden, what God said would happen if man took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he would die. And that's exactly what happens in Genesis 3. And that's still happening here in Genesis 9. Okay. We're going to move into the next video for chapter 10.